So hi everyone, my name is technically Dr. Hannah Bowman because I do have a PhD. And one of my pet peeves is when people don't recognize women who have, those higher degrees. Like we worked hard for those, and we're not being pretentious. We're just, acknowledging our hard work when we have those titles. But yeah, so I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. I went to Purdue and got a degree in chemistry. And then I went and got my PhD also in chemistry from the University of Wisconsin. And my PhD actually kind of focused on the intersection of chemistry and biology. It was what we call chemical biology in the field, which is sort of how does chemistry affect biology? A lot of people are like, well, isn't that biochemistry? Biochemistry is just more of the general how does it all work? In chemical biology, we're actually trying to make an impact on the biology using chemistry techniques. And that led me into a career in manufacturing sciences, which is basically technical support for manufacturing processes. And so I've worked at Eli Lilly and Company, and now I currently work at Catalent Biologics in Bloomington, where I'm a senior scientist, and I've been there for about 3.5 years now. Absolutely love it. And so day to day, I'm trying to figure out how to run our clients' processes on our equipment, like in our space, and making sure that they're going to make life-saving medicine for people in the safest, like most compliant way, right? Because we don't want to give medicine to people that doesn't work or that would cause a safety concern. And so there's a lot of science that goes into that, making sure that we're doing things correctly. But I'm not doing the typical science things that you might think about when you say, oh, somebody's a scientist, somebody's a chemist. I don't wear a lab coat. I don't go in the lab. I don't, work with test tubes. But what I do is I work, like I said, with clients. I work with engineers. I work with a large cross-functional team to do my job and to make sure that the process is going to run the way that we intended it and that it's going to run smoothly.
Awesome. I know you already answered what kind of work that you do as
Yeah.
you're a scientist trying to like make sure that medications are safe for patients and things like that.
Yep.
But what is your specific area of research?
So, like I said, it's not really research in the traditional sense. I'm not trying to understand things that society doesn't know, right? So that's like when I was doing my PhD, that's what I was doing, right? Like there were fundamental questions about how does the world work, how could we make changes to things, and nobody had ever tried it before. And so I was the first one to do that, and that's what research is fundamentally. Now that I work in pharmaceuticals, actually other people do the research. The companies that are my clients do that research, and they said, well, what if we use this molecule to treat this disease? What could that look like? And building on all of their research is sort of where I come in, and I say, okay, now I want to do, make that medicine, that molecule that they discovered, and I want to make it the same way every single day so that there's no difference between the batch that I made today versus tomorrow versus 3 years ago, because that's actually what's going into a human being. And so it's not research in the traditional sense of like, oh, I don't know what the answer is going to be before I set off to do my job. It's really like, I know what the answer has to be. How do I get there?
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, that's actually kind of cool because if didn't exist, there wouldn't be. It's almost like you're keeping the standard for
Yeah,
what medication is being manufactured, because without that, there's no like one batch of medication could be completely different from the next because
exactly.
chemistry
Yeah,
only it only takes a small little thing to change everything.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So my supervisor Cassie mentioned that you have a background in theater. So
Mhm.
how does your background in theater affect your day-to-day job as a chemist, or how does art and science play off of each other in your daily life?
Yeah, so I'll just start, I guess, maybe by giving my theater resume. I talked about my science resume. So yeah, I participated in the theater program at Cathedral High School in Indianapolis. So folks who are from the area know that's a really great program, and the students get super involved in all aspects of theater, and that's where I fell in love with putting on plays and being part of that community. But I've always gravitated sort of towards the technical side. I don't really like being on stage. It's very difficult for me to play the role of an actor because my own personality and my own like motivations for things always come through. Like I'm like, I struggle sometimes with certain characters and scripts where I'm like, why did they do that? I wouldn't have done that, But honestly, like, going through that, I think is actually been helpful for me as a working adult. Like, yes, in science, but I think it would have been true no matter what career I went into. That learning empathy and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and saying, okay, why would somebody react that way in that situation? It's not my reaction, but that is a very valid reaction, and understanding that, I think, at a deeper level makes it so much easier to interact with other human beings. But anyway, sort of to continue the story, so then when I went to Purdue, I was like, I love theater. I don't see myself being able to make a lot of money doing theater. I think I'm going to make more money being a scientist, which I also love doing. So, I was trying to like balance my passions. But I said, okay, I can get a minor in theater. And so that's what I did. And I focused on lighting design as my track for my minor. So, participated in a lot of shows at Purdue while I was there, and then went for my PhD and put theater on hold because I was just so busy doing that. But now that I'm working, I'm trying to actually get back into the theater community, and that's how I met Cassie, was actually through Cardinal Stage's play dates, and that was a great coping tool during the pandemic. Getting on Zoom, every month, and discussing these plays that we had read and really diving deep into the text. And so that kind of goes back to, although I'm not an actor by training, again, sort of, diving into other people's worlds and their lived experience, through what's written on the page by the playwright, and considering different perspectives. And I think that really has been the most helpful thing, in terms of like, impacting me as a scientist, because I get told I don't sound like a scientist all the time. People have a notion of that, we're super introverted and we can't really talk to other people, and they're like, no, you're really good at that. And I'm like, well, I don't feel like I was good at that to like begin with. I feel like that was something I had to learn, and I think being involved in theater was a good chunk of where I learned how to do that.
Awesome. I never consider, I guess kind of, I could see how people could say that a lot of scientists are introverted, but I've met a lot of other scientists that are just like you, that are very extroverted and things like that. So I think it's kind of like a stereotype that needs to be like squandered.
Yes. Yeah.
A ton of different people in every field. And,
exactly.
So in your career as a scientist, is there something you wish people knew about your field in general that they typically assume about whatever it is that what you do, and just the field in general?
Yeah, so I'll talk about science in general, and then maybe I'll go into like pharmaceuticals. So I'll kind of give two answers. First, science in general. I really want people to understand that science is a process, right? So I also do a lot of yoga in my free time, and if you are into yoga, like the teachers are always like, yoga is a practice. You're not at the final destination. You keep working at it, and it evolves over time. Science is the exact same way. We have a lot of tools and methods and frameworks to try to understand how the world works. We don't know how it works at the start, right? We don't come into science already knowing, right? That's, again, what I was saying before. I mean, that's the fundamental definition of research, is that we have to constantly learn. And so I just feel like in the current climate, there's a lot of mistrust of science and scientists and science organizations. They go, well, you said this 2 months ago, and then, you changed your mind. You must be hiding something. You must be lying. And it's like, no, the process of science is happening. The practice of science is working. We thought we understood it, and then we kept doing experiments, and we learned something new, and we had to shift the conclusion because we learned new information. So, whatever topic that is, you know, you keep in mind that when a scientist changes the outcome, it's not because they're trying to be sneaky or anything. It's because they're continuing to do their job, and they've learned something new. And then the piece about pharmaceuticals, that I want people to understand is that there are thousands of people that work for pharmaceutical companies all over the world, and the vast majority of us are doing it not to get rich and not to be like, we are hiding the cure for cancer. We just want people to stay sick so that we have jobs. No, we fundamentally want to help other people. That's why we're in the field. We want to do the best at our jobs that we can. I'm not saying that there aren't, bad apples, and there aren't people that are greedy and setting prices on things, but the pharmaceutical landscape in this country is really complex, and there's not one single person that's making your drugs really, really expensive. Um, there's a lot at play, and again, most of us in the industry are not doing it maliciously. We're there because we're honestly trying to help.
That's a really good way to put it, because the vast majority of the people in your field, they're there to help people. And people seem to forget that a lot, and they tend to bash people that are in the pharmaceutical industry, but it's really like a few bad apples that make
Exactly.
everybody suffer, as does in pretty much a lot of industries in
Yeah.
today's society, unfortunately. So who is your favorite female or non-binary STEAM role model, and why?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that question for a while. And I mean, I could probably point to several women, but I think the example I'll give is actually a friend of mine. And she went to UW with me. She was in the PhD program. I think she joined a year or two after I did. But her name is Kelsey Miles, and she was just always kind of like a strong, badass woman. Am I allowed to say that on this channel? Okay. But I always just admired that about her. And what was even more cool was as she was going through her PhD, she realized that she has a deep, deep passion for music. She kind of sounds like Stevie Nicks when she sings. It's beautiful voice. And so she was like, I want to start a band. I want to become a recording artist and make music and perform live and go on tours. And she started doing that while she was finishing her PhD in chemistry. And I was like, that is freaking fantastic. And she has continued to do that even with the pandemic and everything. So she teaches chemistry as a day job now that she's graduated, but she's really trying to work hard to have a career as a musician. And so yeah, folks can go look her up on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. Like I said, Kelsey Miles. She has really tight curly blonde hair. You'll know it when you see her. You'll be like, okay, that's the Kelsey Miles that Hannah's talking about. And she'll be playing guitar and yeah, and she's just fantastic.
That's awesome. I love it when so many people don't realize that music or theater, in your case, it holds a special role, no matter, even if it's not your day job, it still inspires people daily to keep doing what they do. And I don't want to say it's a coping mechanism, but it just helps with the creative side, because in science you have to be creative. You can't you can't just be analytical all the time. You have to come and think of new things and think of innovation. And that's how innovation happens, is through creativity. And I think that's a very good reason why people are starting to include the arts in the STEM model, because without the arts, STEM wouldn't exist.